Welcome back to the Touchline Talk Show. Thank you so much for tuning in today as I recap the Champions League quarter-final second legs. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out every single week. Already talked about semifinal 1, Real Madrid and Manchester City. Semifinal 2, AC Milan, Inter Milan. What a matchup this is going to be. I'm going to start with AC Milan getting past another Serie A team in Napoli. 1-1 in the second leg, 2-1 on aggregate. AC Milan get an early penalty. It gets saved. Giroud comes to the rescue to make it 1-0 anyway. There were kind of, at the very beginning, you thought maybe, especially after that penalty got saved, maybe this is Napoli's day. I expected Napoli to come back and win. And AC Milan just kind of keep doing that thing where they stay compact. They've got a 2-goal aggregate lead at this point. And then, those last 10 minutes, Napoli get the penalty. They can't convert theirs either. And then Osimhen does get one back at the end of stoppage time, but it's too little too late. There were opportunities in there. This was the one that was really kind of interesting from start to finish of the 4 quarterfinals. But it just never really felt like Napoli kind of had enough confidence, enough belief, enough things going from a momentum standpoint that they were going to pull this off. It was always just they were able to stay within striking distance, especially after AC Milan got that goal to go up 2-0 on aggregate. And again, ultimately, they were a missed penalty away from making it 2-2 and sending it to extra time. And, winning the second leg 2-1, 2-2 on aggregate. But they can't convert the penalty. They run out of time at the end, and so it is AC Milan that go through. 2 main things I want to get to here. One for both teams. On the AC Milan side. And to me, this is where this tie got decided. Rafael Leao was far and away the best player on the field over these 2 legs. Far and away. From the threat he posed, from the actual contributions he made to AC Milan's goals, he was sensational. And I know he's had a not so great season. But he is the kind of player who, particularly in a tournament like this, right, where it's not about showing up every single game in Serie A, it's about rising to the occasion and having moments of brilliance when your team needs them, who can absolutely decide a Champions League tie, and who can decide a semifinal against your crosstown rival. I think I've said this before. I'll say it again here. To me, and I think I talked about this during the World Cup when he didn't get much playing time for Portugal. Outside of Mbappe, from a winger standpoint, so you're not talking about Haaland, you're not talking about Lewandowski, he is as good as anybody in the world for me. And maybe he just doesn't get as much recognition because, he plays in Serie A. Like I said, he hasn't been good this season, at least compared to last season where he was sensational and, the best player on the best team in the league and most important player in Serie A. But every time I watch him, if he makes a move, and Chelsea always seems to be rumored, if he gets to a Chelsea, to a Man City, kind of to that next level, gets out of Serie A and gets to not just one of the bigger clubs in the world, but and one of the more historic ones, because obviously AC Milan, massive club, but gets to one of those teams that everybody is kind of paying attention to, specifically, one of the big 6 in the Premier League. To me, he's one of those guys whose stock is just going to skyrocket on an international fame standpoint. He's sensational. He is so good one-on-one. He is so quick. And he showed it in this tie. To me, that's where it was decided. AC Milan had the best player on the field. Napoli stars, I mean, Osimhen got the goal. But other than that, they just didn't do enough. Napoli had their chances. They couldn't take them. And Leao made sure that AC Milan didn't need very many. That's what he offers you. And on the Napoli side of this, I mentioned Osimhen. Obviously, they didn't have him for the first leg. Can't do anything about that. That's an injury. Just really tough luck. And one of the things they've been really good about this season is performing without him there. And you would much rather have him at the home leg than the away leg. 1-0 was not a big deal coming back home. The part of this I didn't get to talk about because I didn't have a show last week. That is the other thing from a Napoli standpoint. You got two of your most important players suspended for this game. The most important game of your season. For no particular reason. There was no need for Kim to do what he did. There was no reason for Andre Frank Zambo and Gisa to do what he did in the first leg. That is not unfortunate. That is self-inflicted. And it very well could have made the difference. Because now you have a combination of you're not at full strength, you're missing your best defender, you're missing the guy who kind of makes your midfield run, who's been so good this season, and your attacking stars didn't have a great day. All of that was a little bit too much to overcome when you already were in a hole heading into the second leg. That part of this cannot get overlooked. That is on Napoli and those two players for making the choices they did in the first leg. Maybe it wouldn't have made the difference in the end, but it is part of the conversation here with how close they came, despite the fact that they weren't great over the 180 minutes. These margins are really thin in this competition, and AC Milan clearly are just comfortable playing against Napoli because they've just played them 3 times, beat them twice, got a draw the third time. I mean, you need to give yourself every opportunity if you're Napoli, and they just didn't. Through Osimhen's injury, through the suspensions, through the lack of finishing, the missed penalty. There were just too many things that went against them, most of which were their own fault. And so here AC Milan are somehow, some way, and thanks in large part to Rafael Leao. And they will meet none other than Inter Milan in the semifinals, as I mentioned before. That 5-3 aggregate 3-3 final score at the San Siro is deceiving. It was 5-1, and then Benfica scored 2 late consolation goals to at least make it a little bit more competitive. But it was too late for that to put any kind of pressure on Inter whatsoever. You come in with your 2-goal lead. Benfica have been incredible at home all season, and Inter went in there and got 2 goals. That's where Benfica lost this. And then Nicolo Barella gets the curler, really good goal to give Inter the early lead. Now you're trying to dig yourself out of a 3-goal hole. And then there is the lovely cross. Benfica get a goal. And you think maybe, just maybe, they can pull this off. And then Lautaro Martinez gets another one, so it's 4-1 on aggregate. And then Joaquin Correa comes on the field and then basically immediately scores, and it's 5-1. And that was kind of that. So the game itself was closer to Benfica at least winning and making the aggregate scoreline a little bit more competitive, a little bit closer. But there is no disputing who the better team was here, and it was 5-3 was probably a little bit generous to Benfica. Inter had this thing wrapped up with 15, 20, 30 minutes to go. And I do want to give Inter some credit, because I've been really hard on both Milan clubs, and I won't apologize for that. They've been bad this season. They've been incredibly inconsistent. Go look at what they've done in Serie A. And even through this, Inter Inter can't win league games right now. They've had this really bad stretch. But they show up in the Champions League. And that's really where I want to give them some credit. Right? You come through this group that includes Barcelona and Bayern Munich. And I don't hold what happened in the Champions League too much against Barcelona. To me, it was the result of a bad draw and them not being cohesive and at their best yet. It's a much bigger deal because of the financial situation they put themselves in. It's not embarrassing because of the teams in their group. So Inter find a way to go through. They do a pretty good job in the group stage. And then they face the two Portuguese teams. And I know they only snuck by Porto. You could argue Porto deserved to go through, or they Inter caught some breaks there. But that Porto team is right now, I would argue, if you ask me whether I want to play Benfica or Porto, I want to play Benfica. That Porto team just beat Benfica. That Porto team played Inter better than Benfica did. That's a really good team. And Benfica are kind of collapsing here after being so consistent for most of the season. It's losses in the league. Now you're out of the Champions League. But these are two very, very good teams. It's not like Inter had an easy path to get here. And I'm not saying they had the most difficult path. But you compare that to what what AC Milan got. Easier group. Chelsea just can't score goals. And that was your big threat in that group. Then you get Spurs, who just have no attacking initiative at that point. So you get by them. And obviously Napoli, having a phenomenal season, hasn't been here before with this kind of pressure. You've got 3 key players out for one of the 2 legs. Again, nothing you can do about it. And AC Milan were the better team. They deserve to go through. I'm not trying to take anything away from them. But just to compare what these 2 teams have done in the Champions League, to me, what Inter has done has been much more impressive. Absolutely none of that matters when they're going to go play each other, though, because any derby, my rule is you just throw all logic out the window. It's going to be captivating. But here we are with these 2 clubs who I talked about from the beginning of the season. Somebody needed to go help Napoli here and kind of uphold Serie A's standing because everybody was having really bad seasons and it wasn't going great in the group stage. And then they both turned it around and then they just kept beating teams. And I still have not been impressed at all by either team this season. But now we're talking about 2. There's one league that has 2 teams in the semifinals. And that is Serie A. And Serie A is going to get a team in the final. And it's not Napoli. That matters from a Serie A reputation standpoint. And it matters for these 2 clubs who hadn't delivered in the Champions League until now. Obviously, they've got the league titles to show for it. They're not going to win one this year. But the next step was, can you get somebody outside of Juventus to do something in the Champions League? And both Inter and AC Milan have delivered. So you got to give them their props for that. In terms of this matchup, I don't have too much on it now, other than I'm going to go back to my Rafael Leao point. To me, that's where this gets decided. If he's the best player on the field, if he is able to dictate the terms of engagement, AC Milan are going to win. if you're able to keep him quiet, I like Inter's collective better, and I certainly like Inter's ability going forward better. Assuming Leao is not otherworldly, because AC Milan just don't have that much outside of him. And they are just not very inspiring in attack sometimes. Whereas this Inter team has, two big name strikers. I know Lukaku has really struggled, but he gives you a very special set of skills. And obviously you got Lautaro Martinez. I just feel better about Inter's variety in attack. Now, question is, can they defend? And then also the other part of this is going to be who gets the first goals here in both legs. Because a lot of what AC Milan is doing is set up Spurs, Napoli, same thing, right? Go ahead, sit back, try and get yourself a second, try and keep your clean sheet. And if you do one of the two, you're probably going to be okay. What happens if they can't use that formula again because Inter are ahead? What happens if AC Milan have to go chase this? That's the other key in this for me, is whose terms does this get played on? Real Madrid, Manchester City, that first goal just doesn't mean as much because those two teams can go score 3 in 10 minutes, This is going to be much more structured in true Italian fashion. Those goals are going to mean a lot more. And so I want to see, can AC Milan dig themselves out of a hole? Because I will, whether it's the semis or the final, my general philosophy, same with NCAA tournament, you are going to have something go wrong at some point. I was talking about this with Manchester City too. What is your ability to adapt to that adversity? You can't just do this one way because you're not going to, these teams are too good for it to just always work out the way you want. And so far it has for AC Milan. Right? Inter went and put up 5 goals here. They just gave up 3 at home, and I know 2 of them were late. And they were completely comfortable because they went and scored 2 at a place where nobody wins. They kept a clean sheet at a place where that team, Benfica, never loses. And then they scored the goals at home, even though Benfica kind of got it going offensively, at least at the end. They scored the goals early enough where those goals didn't matter. That's the kind of versatility I want. It doesn't mean it's going to happen in the semis. It could be the final, right? Real Madrid scored the first goal. Manchester City scored the first goal. What happens when AC Milan have to play from behind? I find it hard to believe they're going to get through the next 2 rounds without that happening. And if they do, full credit to them, because that could very well mean they're winning this whole thing, because they have that part of it set up. If they get the lead, you saw what they did to Napoli, you saw what they did to Spurs, rendered both of those teams and all those great attacking players basically silent. But it's all based around scoring that first goal. Will that happen again with Inter in the semifinals? Those two, another Milan derby, can't wait for it.